Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Worship Artistry Podcast, brought to you by worshipartistry.com. This is the place where worship musicians like yourself come to learn, laugh, and love. Our mission is to bring our best so we can help you bring yours. Whether you're with us live or listening to the podcast later on, we're so thankful for you. We really do love this community. My name is Dan Egan, and as always, we have Bethany in the chat room typing away. And my buddy to my left, about 1,200 miles away, is Jason Houseman. What's up, bro?
Yeah, I'm doing well, man. We'll see if the voice holds out today.
Yeah, you're feeling better, huh?
I am. I've got it. It definitely gets a little squeaky at times, but if I keep in a lower register, then it works. So I'll do my best Barry White impression. I'm not trying to be seductive. I'm just trying to not lose my voice.
Is your voice cracking, like puberty style?
Yeah. Well, if I get excited, that's
well,
what it sounds
that's
like.
going to be my goal for the rest of this podcast. Get you excited. So, tell me, my friend, what are you stoked about right now with worship artistry?
Oh, it's been a good week. I'm excited to be able to teach and actually have a voice. I shot a couple lessons last week that were very much on the froggy side. So hopefully people can bear with that and make it through. Fortunately, they were pretty easy songs, so I didn't have to do too much talking. But I'm just finishing up today the lesson for From the Day by I Am They. What can I say? It's a lot of A's in there. But it's a really fun tune. And I actually got to take the banjo part and put it mainly on guitar and just kind of make some adjustments to it. Cause you can actually play another instrument. If you take a banjo and you put it on guitar, you can play the exact notes usually and it's fine, but it doesn't sound quite right because it's not a banjo, it's a guitar. So it was fun to kind of take that main part and put it together with, and actually make it sound like a guitar. So I'm stoked about that lesson. That one's pretty cool. And then
so there's actually banjo in the lesson?
No, I'm teaching the banjo part on the guitar. I actually thought about pulling out my banjo, but we don't have banjo lessons. That would be kind of weird. So I just taught the banjo part on the guitar.
I don't know.
Maybe if you could listen when I answer the question, instead of just waiting to talk. This is what I tell my son all the time. I already told you that.
You treat me like a 4-year-old. Kind of being stoked. Last week's podcast, if you guys were on it, it was really a lot of fun. If you weren't on it, we discussed a blog post that's been floating around called, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, why it's time to boycott the worship industry.
Yes,
is that correct?
Yes, that was the title. That was the clickbaity title.
Yeah, it's total yikes topic, but we had a blast talking about it, and we had some really cool feedback. And so if you haven't listened to it, go check it out.
Yeah, it's worth a listen. It's funny because when we first posted that podcast, we just wanted to discuss the article, but as soon as people saw the word boycott, they were just like, I can't believe it. Yeah. Like, what's going on? And everybody kind of like lost their mind and started like writing all these comments, which was really exciting. But they were actually all really well thought out. It wasn't like a troll fest. It was just kind of people like, I have some real thoughts on this. And then, then we end up having the discussion, having great conversation about it. And that's what I just love about this community. It's not these kind of polarized trying to create controversy. It's more just like, let's have an honest and clear discussion about things about worship. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So
I couldn't agree more. Well, before we get rolling on today's topic, which is titled Everything You Don't Need to Know to Play Music and Worship for Guitar and Bass.
Yeah, this whole podcast is just going to be full of useless information.
I do like that. I like useless info. I actually speak with wisdom when it comes to useless information.
Yeah.
So, before we jump in, I want to get into the member mail. Jay, hit it.
All right, so today we had it was kind of a long question. It's by TMS Dixon 62. But he's talking, I'm going to kind of shorten it and just kind of hit the main point, but he's basically talking about spontaneous praise and worship. Kind of, it sounds to me like it's just, it's kind of taking over his life. He's kind of in a space of where he's just throughout the day, he's finding himself singing and just kind of coming up with lyrics and coming up with melodies. And he's talking about using it using those times in a more corporate time. And so he asks, he says, just wondering what anyone's thoughts are on this, with it being unpracticed, unknown to everyone else, and not knowing where I'm going with it. If it might throw the rest of the congregation off, or do I just trust that the Holy Spirit will lead us all as one in accordance with what God desires from us? Thank you for any input given, and God bless. And, Dan, you and I actually, we grew up playing in church, and there was definitely a time of spontaneous worship happening. That's kind of where we cut our teeth in a lot of ways in high school. And what are your thoughts on that initially? Do you think there's a place for that? I mean, obviously, there's places like Bethel that just thrive on that. If you go and look at a song online from like Bethel, which is huge right now, that video might be 2 hours long.
So what does he play? Did you say that? Did I miss that?
He doesn't say what instrument he plays. He's just talking about leading worship.
Leading worship. And start just flowing, going off the map a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, Jay, we grew up, Jay and I grew up in Jersey. We played worship together for, since we were little boys.
15.
Yeah.
He was 15, I think.
I sounded like this, but Jay sounded like this.
It's not accurate.
But yeah, because we grew up in that kind of vineyard music, right, Jay?
Yep.
So we had like these renewal times, and I think that helped us get better as musicians, because we would really just kind of flow, and the worship leader would do the leading, of course. But Jay, I remember many times you would take a riff or a solo that you created, and we'd all kind of follow you.
Play it way too many times.
Yeah. We repeat it over and over. So there's a place for it. It's been a while though since I've played that style of worship. There's a pretty strict map. We've got a click track, and we stick to that, whether we're playing a show on the road or just worship at the church.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It depends on the atmosphere, what type of church it is, but you got to be really careful, because the band's not really good. It could really crash and burn.
Way. Well, I think the point that you mentioned is, I think the clear word is the atmosphere. Is when you're, because I would say, like, I remember when we started kind of moving in that world for a while, and it was something that kind of spontaneously happened, but it was happening with everybody at the same time, and so it wasn't like somebody just walked out on stage and just started doing something. Like, hey, I've been doing this in my quiet time, last Tuesday, and so I'm just going to come out and just do it. I think sometimes there's that sense of like, well, if the Holy Spirit is in it, then we can just go and do something. We just go and do it, and we don't give any context to it. And, the Holy Spirit will kind of just do the work. And sometimes that happens, right? But I think it's important to actually lead people into what you're doing. So kind of if you're saying, hey, this is like what God's been speaking to me this week, and I want to sing this for you, and see how people respond. But don't just kind of go into your own world and kind of what you've been doing, because your congregation might not be there. And it's okay for you to take them there, but they have to be ready to go, and you have to equip them to go. And so that would be the main thing that I would watch is going, okay, what's happening in this moment? And to be very aware that this is something that we're all doing together, not something that you take from your quiet time and just throw out on the stage.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. I like how he's saying, let the Holy Spirit do his thing, and that's amazing. But I think our collective answer is be open to it, but be very, very cautious. Be very careful.
Yeah.
And yeah, exactly. Make sure it coincides with the atmosphere. So that's a really good question.
Yeah, I love that. Keep them coming. If you guys want to be answered on member mail, you can just go to worshipartistry.com/greenroom. And just type member mail in the search bar. You'll find the post, and leave us a comment, and we'll try and answer it on the podcast.
Good. Before we get into what we don't need to know, let's talk about what we do need to know. I'll kind of share my story of becoming a worship bass player. When we were young, so I played saxophone in elementary school. I know. I look like a sax player, don't I?
Yeah.
But I played in elementary, in the band, the school band, and I played actually all the way through high school. I wouldn't say I was a band geek, but I loved music. I was a music fanatic. So I actually picked up the bass when I was in high school. It was pretty late. And so I kind of had a basic understanding of the scale and some music theory. And I say theory very loosely. It's G, and then there's an A, and there's a G sharp in the middle. That's about all I knew. So when I picked up bass, here's what I did. I printed out chord charts, and I'm not talking about charts. I'm just like the words of the song with a letter above the words, right? I mean, we still use them a lot of people anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we don't, but and I just put it on a CD player. There was a song I thought it was the coolest bass line ever. Jay, do you remember "Light the Fire Again"?
Oh yes. Hey man, Capo 3, play it in D.
Dude, amazing memory.
Yeah, I remember it well. I remember the lead riff too.
Well, the bass line, it was four.
What was
notes.
It? Can you sing it?
It was do 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 do. All right. I realized people listening to the podcast were like
not seeing the dance happening.
Not seeing the dance.
All right.
It was F and then C and then G and B flat. So I can't even remember the key.
It was an F. The song was an F. That's what I remember about it.
So it was 5-2, 4-1 or something like that. Anyway, so I just started playing that with the actual record. I think it was Vineyard Music. Is it Brian Dirksen?
Yes.
Yeah. So this
whole podcast is actually a history of the Vineyard movement in the 90s.
Don't say that.
That's what this is really about.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind it though. I love that stuff. So that's all I did. I printed out I went to my church, and the worship pastor was like, "Hey, I just print me out like every chart you have of songs that are popular." And I just went home and got in front of a CD player and played with the pros. And I didn't really care about learning Mixolydian modes and.
Wow, way to drop Mixolydian. Nice.
You like that?
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So what I learned, I think, from that, Jay, is how to play with a band. Instead of sitting there just trying to make my fingers go fast and sound cool, I was just playing worship songs, which is why I have such a passion for worship artistry. That's what we're doing. You're not only learning these songs, but you're getting better at your instrument through worship, which is just really cool. And you're playing with pros kind of when you're practicing, and so that's. For people learning it starting out, it may not be a popular opinion, but I like that.
So basically what you're saying is you don't need to know anything to get started. That's basically like if you know what a note is. I mean, because essentially what we're trying to do with this podcast is speak directly to learning what you don't know, and to me, like, this comes back to birth class.
Oh boy.
I don't know. I swear this is going to make sense. So
I hope so, Jim.
Well, yeah, it will. So I don't know if you've ever been to a birth class. When Allie was pregnant with our first child, and I was just kind of along for the ride, we decided that
you did your part.
I did my part, but we decided let's take a birth class. Now, we both had education, and Allie works at the hospital, so she's familiar. We have friends that are nurses and everything. But we thought, let's go ahead and take this class. It was like a 7-week course, and it was, every Wednesday night or something for 2 hours. And it was the worst course I've ever been in. Like, it was every night was like pulling teeth, because the teacher was kind of awkward, and all the people in the class were awkward, and we just didn't have anything in common. And you try and like start conversation with somebody, and they just stare at you. It was one of those classes. It's like my personal nightmare. But
all the guys were probably terrified. That's why.
Yeah. Well, but sometimes they would like send the guys over into a room, and I'd be like, "All right, so what's up, guys?" And they would be like,
"I don't want to be here."
Yeah. So anyway, so the point being, all right, is we went through that whole class. We went 7 weeks because we just wanted to find out, we wanted to have a comprehensive understanding of what was going on, and so that when we got in the moment to have a baby, that we felt like we had all the information that we needed. And so we went through 7 weeks of this course, and we literally didn't learn anything. like there is not one thing that I walked away and went, oh, you know what? I didn't know that, and that's going to be useful. It turns out we kind of already knew everything we needed to know. We just needed to do those things that we knew. And I think a lot of ways, that's what learning music's like. When you're learning an instrument, you're often intimidated by all the things that are out there music. You kind of get like, oh my gosh, to be a good guitar player, I look at these guys that are good and they know all these things. And so you learn chords, but you're like, that's not enough. I need to learn like way more things, because how does this guy play those chords and make them sound so good? And the answer is you have to, if you get certain things down and get certain things comfortable with them, you can kind of slowly expand into other things. But there's kind of a root group of things that you need to know. And if you know those things and you become really good at them, you're going to be in good shape. And so that's what we're going to talk about in this podcast, is all the things that you really do need to know, and then all the things that you need to not worry about, so that you can walk in confidence when you're trying to learn your instrument.
I do like that. Actually, your example is perfect. It's all these things that you kind of already know. And it would surprise you to know that you already knew that.
Yes. And
now let's just practice it. And it happens a lot of times in life, of course. Like, oh, I already kind of knew that. It's like, man, I wish I stuck to my guns on that. So that's the do's and the don'ts. So another let's just say don't. Can I talk about don'ts?
Well, before we talk about don'ts, let's go ahead and take a quick break. And then we'll really dive into this thing. Dan's so excited he's forgetting we need to take a short break.
I don't look at the format.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, Dan.
How you feeling, bud?
Not so great. I've been losing my voice for the last week.
Yeah, you sound terrible.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I do. But unfortunately, I don't have anybody to back me up this Sunday, so I still have to lead worship. I wish there was some easy way to train leaders behind me so they could learn the songs and be prepared, so I'm not stuck on the spot trying to sing without a voice.
There is, buddy. Have you heard of worshipartistry.com?
Worship Artistry? What's that?
Oh, it's the cat's pajamas. Worship Artistry is an online resource featuring full 5-piece band arrangements of all the latest and top worship songs. Each song is broken down by section and features in-depth teaching videos, practice loops, charts, tabs, and sheet music for lead and rhythm guitar, keyboard, bass, and even drums.
Wow, that does sound incredible for my beginners. Is there any way my experienced players can grow from it?
That's what's so awesome about it. Even though every lesson features a ton of content, it's easily chaptered, so you can jump right to the part that you need to learn.
Wait, so you're saying I don't have to watch a 10-minute YouTube video to get the 30 seconds of the information I actually need?
That's right. And once you've got it, you can practice along with the music video and loops to gain confidence and refine your playing.
Wow, that does sound like the cat's pajamas.
Meow.
How do I sign up?
Just go to worshipartistry.com and sign up for your risk-free trial. They have plans to cover both individual members and teams.
Well, I'm going to pause this podcast and head over there right now, and then return and listen to the amazing discussion we're about to have.
Let me welcome him back.
Okay, big shot.
Okay, welcome back. We are going to get into the nitty-gritty of everything you don't need to know to play music in worship for guitar and bass.
Yeah, but sticking with guitar and bass, staying away from childbirth.
Yeah, sadly. Our normal bass instructor, Daniel, my fellow bass dragon, couldn't be with us. But I'm qualified.
Yes. Daniel was really bummed he couldn't make it, actually. He kind of had a last-minute thing coming up. And I was like, it's okay, we have another Dan. And he also plays bass, so let's just go ahead and dive right in.
All right, so speaking of things you already knew that you didn't know you knew and need to practice, let's. What do you think? As far as the guitar right now, you want to talk acoustic, electric, lead, rhythm? What do you got?
I think we can do them all. I think kind of the overarching thing. Let me first talk about what we do need to know, because there are things that are super important, and if you don't have those, you're going to be in trouble. And you're going to be that guy that's like 17 years into playing guitar and still comes to lessons because they're like, I feel like I've learned everything wrong. And then you watch them play and you go, yes, clearly, let's teach you how to do this right. And so the number one thing that you need to work with always from the very beginning is to get proper technique. And I'm sure it's the same way with bass, right? Like if you're starting off, if you don't know how to fret the notes properly and get good tone out of each note that you play, then you're going to forever be playing buzzy, kind of nasty sounding things, right? So much, guitar players love to focus on their amp and their guitars and their pedals and everything else, but so much of your tone simply comes out of striking the string well and fretting the note well. So you got to have that. That's really important.
To echo that, sorry to interrupt for bass, the bass tone is in your fingers. Okay? These are my fingers. Like you say, you're picking it correctly, putting your finger in the right spot next to the fret. That's huge. But for bass players, it doesn't matter what kind of gear you got. It doesn't matter if you have a massive pedal board. If you are not striking it with confidence, pulling it correctly, then it won't sound good. So that's where your tone comes from.
I actually had a friend of mine who they had a bass player in their band, and when they went to go and record, the guy recorded all his bass tracks, and then the lead singer went back in and re-recorded all the bass tracks because once they got out of the live venue and actually got into a recording studio, they realized this guy has terrible technique.
Yeah, and
so they had to redo the whole thing. They were a great band, but yeah, it was kind of a weird deal. Another thing that you really need to focus on is with guitar, but with bass too, is your rhythm. I always tell people, like, you can play all the right notes. But if you are not playing in rhythm, you're not playing music. And you can get away with a lot of things if you stay in rhythm. You don't have to be really busy and do lots of stuff as long as you're kind of staying within the track of the song. But if you don't play in rhythm, it basically, with the guitar, it's strumming, right? It's like if you're not playing in rhythm, you're not playing music. And so that's so important. And I would think with bass, it would be the same thing too, because you're so locked in with the drums, right?
Well, that's something that a lot of beginners don't understand. Even good players, that they can rip up and down the neck. They're amazing. But you put them in a worship setting, and they just got to lay down a good backbone of the song, and they just can't do it. The kick drum, is something that they need to follow, and a bass player and kick drummers need to work together. It's not that you have to just follow the drummer. When you have a good rapport with the drummer and you feel like it's a better groove to do, a 1 and 3, and a good drummer can feel that and switch to what you're doing. But yeah, playing with the drummer, that honestly, Jay, that's number one in worship. It is number one. Playing well with the drummer.
It's really number one in all styles of music.
Yeah.
I remember seeing an ad a long time ago, and it was like, their eyes are on the singer, but their booty's shaking to the bass. And that's true.
I've never heard that.
That's true in all music. It's absolutely true.
Yeah, it is true. And when they don't play in sync, people don't understand why it sounds bad, but it sounds bad.
Yeah.
And they don't, like, bass player, drummer, they're not really in sync. They're not going to know that, really, unless it's a musician. But they'll know it stinks.
Yes, exactly.
Would you agree?
Yes, I would. So that would be, honestly, when it comes to guitar, you're strumming and good tone, and then finally your chord names. Now, one thing that you don't need to know is why a chord is named what. You eventually want to know that. That stuff's somewhat important because you need to be able to communicate. But really, I always find so many of my private students, they learn chords with songs, and then they go on to another song. I'm like, okay, let's pull out that E chord that you learned in the last song. And they're like, which one? And because they're not putting to memory the name of the chord. You don't need to know why it's called that. You need to know that when you see the word A, you put your fingers here. That's the main idea. That's what you need to know. And honestly, when it comes to guitar, if you know those 3 things for rhythm guitar and you're good at those things, you will be able to do 90% of what you need to do for a guitar, and you'll be able to improve dramatically from there if you have that bass line.
So tone, rhythm, and then not caring what the names Names of the chords, just put your fingers in the right spot.
Yeah, well, you got to know the names of the chords.
Or, I'm sorry, not the...
Not the why, just the what.
why.
Know the what. The why comes later. So should we talk about what we don't need?
Yeah, I have a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan,
but I don't. It may not be popular, though. I don't know.
Dan, do you need to read music?
You don't. Screech.
I can't make a good screech noise right now.
Okay, you don't need to read music. Is it bad to read music? Oh, gosh, no. It's great. It's great. But you don't need to. Now, what we do and what I learned later on in my bass playing tenure, if you will.
Nice word.
Yeah, thank you. Is the number system, the Nashville number system. Jay, I know you're familiar with that.
I am.
I hope, anyway.
Yeah.
Your instructor does not know.
But I know exactly what it is.
Yes, you do. But in a worship setting, oh man, it is extremely handy. So for those of you who don't know what the number system is, it's strictly putting a number on the chord or the note. And it depends on what key you're in, of course, but if you're in the key of G, then the 1 is a G. The 2 is an A. So if you're playing worship and you are going off the map and the leader starts playing a song that you don't know, you can turn around and you could say 1, 2, 4. And then maybe that's the progression, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is extremely helpful. And actually, when I play at church and I'm playing songs that I've never even heard of and I show up for sound check, they give me the number system instead of an actual chord chart.
Well, and I think for while it's useful everywhere, I think in bass especially because so much of with bass you're playing single notes, right? And so you're really just playing shapes and patterns on the neck, right? So for Daniel on the website teaches the number system. He's always talking in that terminology. He says, "Okay, we're on the 1, then we're going to the 4." And because for a bass, all you have to do is just, so if you're in the key of G and you're playing G, C, D would be like your chord changes, in your root note, you're going to go, okay, that's my 1, 4, 5, because that's where those fall in the scale, right? Yep. Whereas when you go to with like a guitar player, it's a little bit trickier because you're having to change, like especially if you're playing open chords, but if you're playing lead work or you're playing bar chords and that sort of thing, it's also very visual on the neck. You can see that.
Yeah. Yeah. The pattern thing is huge for bass players.
Yeah.
Because we can, not many songs have big epic chord changes anymore, but but it's no big deal if there is. If you're in the key of G and you jump up to an A and it's 1, 4, 5 as a chord, in G it's G, C, D. Jump up to A, it's A, D, E. Mm-hmm. And so it's still 1, 4, 5. You just change it to the keys, and it's the same exact pattern. And so you could see that all the way up the neck of a bass. So no, Jay, you don't have to read music. In guitar, do you feel like you do?
No, actually, I had to. I played piano for 6 years, and so sheet music is how you start that for sure. You just kind of dive into that. And Ryan kind of teaches around that. It's pretty cool when he does his piano lessons, how he speaks to it to try and teach it, in a number of different ways. When it comes to guitar with sheet music though, like when I first started worship artistry, I actually had to kind of relearn, like I knew how to write tab. The program that we use, you need to actually print out the actual timing on it as well. It took me a while to really kind of relearn that, come back to it. When it comes to actually reading sheet music, like the actual notes and going, okay, it's a C to a G or whatever, not important. Like as a guitar player, you don't need to know that stuff. It's great. It's fun. It's good to know it. If you run into a situation where you're like, oh, is that a C chord? I don't know. Like it's not, if in 90% of guitar music, you don't know. I always tell people I've been playing for, it's like 20 years now. I've been playing for 20 years and never once has anybody put sheet music in front of me and asked me to play it.
Yep.
And I've done studio work. I've done church work. I've done a bunch of bands. I write music. I've done all that stuff. Never once has somebody been like, hey, can you just play this?
Yep.
It just doesn't happen.
It's usually the number system.
Yeah,
right?
it's the number system, chord chart, Sometimes the tabs, we use the tabs to clarify things. Sometimes it's just kind of hard to see things. When you've got the videos, if you kind of look at it and you go, okay, wait, what's that one note that he's doing? And then you can see it on the tab and it's really clear. But for the most part, it doesn't quite, it's not necessary.
No. And typically, as kids, you learn piano or you play saxophone in the band or trumpet. That's kind of when you do learn that stuff. And you guys have big nights, big orchestras. All the parents come out and you're in front of your music stand, and it is all really, really good. It's to get better at music. But yeah, you're right. In worship, learn the number system, learn chord charts, learn how to play with your band, with your drummer. And so, all right, can I go to the next? What you don't need to know?
Yes.
Musicians are notoriously known for being just gear junkies, right? If they don't have a massive pedal board in front of them that emulates what the Edge would play with, then
why do we always name drop the Edge?
He's the greatest.
In worship, it's either Coldplay or U2. Listen to some other music, people.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Someday we're going to talk about other music. It's going to be great.
Well, yeah. Well, as a bass player, here's my opinion. Okay, just my 2 cents. Get a good sounding guitar. Okay, get a good sounding bass guitar. Obviously, Fender is popular. So I went from I had a Fender. It was like a hybrid precision jazz. That was my first bass. Then I went to a G&L. G&L, George and Leo Fender made G&Ls before he died. And so I tried this G&L, and it's a really hot bass, like really aggressive, and it's not very soft, so it's you got to be careful kind of when you're playing it.
It's hot and aggressive like Dan.
Thank you. Jay,
yes.
I was hoping somebody would
matches
say that.
Your personality.
Yeah, thank you. So then I went to a Fender Jazz, okay, and it was just really popular. And it took me a while to get used to it because it's so much softer sounding. It's smoother, but they all had one thing in common: the tone was insane. And of course, tones in your fingers as well. But a good bass with good technique, that's really all you need. If you need a bunch of pedals. In worship, I'm not sure why. I mean, compression, some cool things. Tuner pedal. That's a pedal you need.
Yes. Number one.
So if you are in tune playing with a good guitar, with good technique, that's all you need. It really is all you need. All the other stuff, I have some of it, believe me. It comes into place. There's a time and a place for it. But that's kind of my what you don't need rant. If you will.
Well, when it comes to gear, people ask me that stuff all the time. It's just like, what pedal do I need? What's this? And honestly, I go back to what you said. Like, I think pedals and that kind of thing are great to expand your sound. I definitely, I played in a band for a while where I swing to different things. I used to be like, just give me a guitar and an overdrive and I'm good. And then I ended up playing in a band that, we were into a lot of Radiohead and a lot of kind of more the ambient kind of stuff. And so I was trying to do everything possible to make my guitar sound not like a guitar. And so, yes, I had a million pedals and I was working the knobs all the time and using bizarre things to strum my guitar and everything like that. But when it comes to like the worship stuff, we do a tone section in every lesson. And usually I don't go beyond 2 pedals to recreate the main tone. Now you can kind of take your own thing and keep messing with it, but it's like, do you have a decent overdrive? Do you have a decent, once again, do you have a good guitar? Do you have a good amp? And then it's like, do you have a decent overdrive and do you have a decent delay? And then, and that's usually enough to get you by with almost anything. And it's way fun to have more things, but It's not necessary. You don't need to go out and spend $1,000 on gear or at least on pedals to be like, okay, now I can play like this guy. If you want to play like somebody, you got to work on their technique and less on like all their gear kind of thing. So you don't need to know a ton about gear. You just need some basic things. And then it's fun to expand.
Yeah, I agree. The guitars, playing electric especially, you do need you do want some stuff.
Yeah.
But you, like you said, you get by with the basics, and then when you kind of master that, then you expand. But one thing that I noticed about a lot of guitar players is they're geeking out on their gear during the whole worship set, right? So I mean, it looks like
They're worshiping.
they're dancing.
They're worshiping something.
Well, they looks like they're dancing, but all they're doing is foot pedaling every pedal they can find. And a lot of times, and most of these pedals, they have the knobs too to adjust. So they're hitting that pedal and then they're bending over to fix something. And I'm all about sounding great, but even though we're not the ones singing necessarily, we are worship leading. And I want you to focus on your music, focus on the song and the map and playing with the band. But it is distracting when all you're doing is tinkering with your gear during the set.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta. I might disagree with you a little bit on that, just because if you're doing something, dare. I will. I'm doing it now. To me, pedals are an extension of your instrument, and so if you've mastered a bunch of things, and now you're like just kind of like, to me, it's no different than a keyboard player tweaking knobs on their keyboard. It might look a little weird for a guitar player, and people get distracted by things. For a while, the whole looping thing was the craze, where it was like, oh, I'm going to create this loop. And, there was a guy in my church who was really good at it, but it was like, he spent so much time creating a loop. And what that did is, instead of people going, like, staying engaged in worship and what they were doing, instead they were like, hey, what's he doing? How's he doing that? And like, yeah. Once that starts becoming the focus, it's like, maybe totally. maybe not the best scenario, in my opinion.
Yeah. So you agree with me?
Yes. Well, no. I'm just saying, there's different purposes for different things. It's all about what's your intention.
Agreed. But is there a way for you guitar frogs to
wait? Bass players are dragons and guitarists are frogs. What's your problem, man?
I thought everyone knew that. So, is there a way for you guitar frogs to dial that stuff in before playing? I understand that's why they're pedals. You use your foot, and that's definitely less distracting than bending over and turning a bunch of stuff. And of course, when you bend over and take your hand off the guitar, you stop playing.
Sometimes guitarists need to stop playing.
That I agree with, my friend.
That's the bass player talking over there. Oh, you can't stop playing.
Well, if it's a big chorus and they don't like how, we built up to it and they're strumming and it's like, yeah, I can change the tone here. And they stop playing, it empties out. And it drives me a little crazy. All right,
that's fine.
Is that fair?
I'll give you that. But that's not something that's something you don't need, right? You can literally plug your bass into an amp, or even plug direct into a system through a direct box or something, and play good bass guitar, right?
Yes,
essentially. Okay. Here's another thing that you don't need. I'm gonna talk about scales for a second. Uh-huh. Guitar players inevitably they go, what scales do I need to know? It's like right away, I need to get better at guitar. I need to know a million more scales. Okay. And truth is, you need to know essentially one scale. Two, you can call it two. You have the classic, guitar pentatonic or hexatonic, which is the 4, or 5 or 6 tone scales. And those keep very blues, rocky kind of stuff. You can do a lot with those things. That's usually a great place to start. I generally, when I play lead guitar, I think pentatonic, and then I use my major and minor scale to augment that. So it's just like a couple extra notes, because a pentatonic happens within the major scale. But if you have a good understanding of the major scale, also known as the Ionian mode, and the minor scale, also known as the Aeolian mode, if you can and they can actually be the same notes. We have a whole lesson on modes on worshipartistry.com in the 101 section. I highly recommend watching it. I think it makes more sense than anything that anybody ever told me about scales. But essentially, you literally need to know that one form. And then you can play that form up and down the neck. You can play in different positions. We teach all those things. But that's it. Like, you don't need to know augmented diminished 9 scale. I mean, if you want to be a jazz player, or you're going to be like a shredder and you're going to be like one of those like virtuoso kind of guys, yeah, go ahead and spend that time on it. But if you know your major scale and your pentatonic scale, and you know those really, really, really well, you will be, there's almost nothing in any kind of rock, pop, worship genre. There's almost nothing that you can't play. So master those, and don't waste your time trying to figure out all these bizarre scales that people are blogging about to get more clicks or whatever. Like, I think sometimes teachers feel they need to teach more so that they have more to talk about. But honestly, if you learn those scales and you're comfortable with them, then it's just about learning songs, and you'll recognize, oh, this riff comes out of that scale, because you know the scale really well. But you realize, oh, okay, this riff, oh, you know what? This is that position. I'm learning this song and I'm learning this riff, and this looks really familiar because, oh, I know the scale and it's this. Yeah. So if you focus on, am I saying it enough? Major scale, minor scale, which are kind of the same thing if you look at the lesson, and also the pentatonic scale, and those will get you so very far.
Yeah, and I want to remind everybody the more complex scales and different modes and stuff. We're talking about worship here today. Or like Jay said, if you're playing in a jazz band or doing some shredding stuff on the side, if you're playing at Sweet 16 parties or something, those things are actually really good to learn. But for worship, do you need it?
Well, and for most music, and you don't want to start there. You want to start with getting those main pieces down. And then what happens is you get this base of knowledge, and then you just start kind of learning little things from different parts. So you learn some song and you go, I never played that riff before. Or you go, why did that note go in there? That's not usually in there. And then you find out, that's because it's from this particular mode, and it's, built out of Mixolydian, which is also in the mode lesson. But you start with those things and you use that as your base. And then from there, music, it's infinite. You can just kind of expand into all these different genres and different specialties and be fine. Those are all great things, but you have to get the base of knowledge down, and you don't ever need those for unless you're specializing in something.
Right. Yeah. And for bass, it's very similar. The major scale, especially for the number system. If someone says, all right, we're going to play in the key of G, and you got to go 1, 5, 6, 4, you got to obviously know your scale to do that.
Yes.
But before even now, before a song, it's like, all right, here's a new song. It's in the key of A. So in my head, it's like, all right, I know, and I'll go A, B, C. I'll kind of note in my head all the notes that are safe. Okay.
Yes.
Because, I do want to play to the map, but there's times where I want to throw in a fill or do something that's, in my opinion, tasteful. May not be everyone's opinion.
I will say, I've known Dan a long time. Dan is one of the most tasteful bass players I've ever played with. So he knows what he's talking about.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
So
that's a nice thing I'm going to say about you today.
Yeah. Well, you owed me one. Just kidding. But the major scale to the number, to know the numbers, know the safe notes, you could really do a lot of damage on the in a worship set. To play well with the drummer, good tone, good technique, major scales with the number system. You could really do a lot of damage and sound great. I kind of made my career that way, and this, like I told you, Jay, the other day, Daniel, our bass instructor, he's incredible. He's an incredible bass player. I could play it all, but I don't think I could teach it.
Yeah.
It takes a whole nother skill level, another skill set to teach.
It's a different world.
You do that well.
It's a different thing. Daniel is a great teacher. He's also a very tasteful bass player, and he does a really great job of actually kind of, like what he does. He focuses on the things that you need to know, and that's what I think is kind of the overall arch of this whole podcast. The idea is that it's like, all these things. If you go to our 101 sections in worship artistry, you'll see here are these 4 lessons that you need to take. This is where you start. Once you understand these, then you can kind of go into these little different skill sets and go, oh, how do I play my bar chords better? How do I, use this mode. They're kind of broken up into different levels. But the main thing is learning music within the context of songs. That's why we teach everything through worship songs. It's so that you can learn the worship song. But really it's about diving in, going, I've got these few things under my belt, and now I can go and learn this song. Because I know that when you play the chord this way, this is how it's supposed to sound. And I know that when I play this note, it should be like this. And maybe it's a little hard for me to start, and maybe it's a stretch for me to get this note, but I can still play it. And what usually happens is you start understanding it after your fingers understand it. Like your brain might take a little while to catch up to your fingers, but eventually it happens. And you got to get that muscle memory down, have your fingers understand what they're supposed to do, and then you can kind of go back and learn all this extra stuff,
Yeah, and I don't want to plug the site too much, but it's why we love what we do, Worship Artistry. We're taking worship songs, amazing songs, and we're teaching people to improve their craft through worship. I kind of dig that.
Yeah, well, they all have something to teach. I think every song has something to teach. And so if you just kind of, even if it's kind of reinforcing something that you did before, or it's kind of learning a new shape or new form. And, and then on the green room, we have all the other stuff where we talk more about little tricks and techniques and that kind of stuff, which is all available there too. But it's really about getting an understanding of how music works. Okay. So guys, that's what you need to know. And that's what you don't need to know.
And that's what you don't need to
know.
So
if you need to know it, it's on Worship Artistry. And if you don't need to know it, it's not.
So it was fun. It was fun talking about it, though. What you don't need. I hope you guys had fun today. Yep. Jay, I don't know if you have any other extra points, but I was thinking wrap it up and maybe answer some questions.
Yeah, do we have any questions over there in the chat room?
I did see one pass by. I thought it was a good question about playing a Fender Jazz. If it's more appropriate to play, if you could do a pick or a finger.
Yep.
Just kind of what my take on it was that. I do both, but it totally depends on the song.
Yep.
And technique. Talk about technique. Tones in your finger. When you pick, if you do that incorrectly, you know better than anybody, Jay. It could be really tingy and kind of aggressive and obnoxious.
Daniel does a really good job of explaining how he's getting the tone out of every song. So it's funny because you talk about tone, right? And I mean, very rarely is he talking about gear. He's more like, okay, we're going to use a pick on this song. And the reason is we need to have this drive and it's going to give this sound. And you can play a song that, you take a song like Made Alive by Citizens and Saints, right? Like that song is a obviously picked bass line and it matters. It sounds, it has a certain sound to it. Whereas other ones, they might not have such a difference, but it's, a pick is going to be more aggressive. It's going to be tighter. The fingers are going to have that more that rounder sound. And so it's really a matter of what are you trying to accomplish within the song? What kind of tone are you trying to get?
We, what's that Phil Wickham song, Jay? We just taught it. It's the bass picks. We just played it on Sunday.
This is Amazing Grace?
Yeah. Yes.
Is it that one?
This is Amazing Grace. Oh, amazing song. So we played it at church, and that's a pick song. It's driving, especially the verses. They're on the 16ths. So it's, down, up, down, up. And then just eights on everything else, and a pick just works on that. But when we go into we sang Overcome, I'm not picking that. I want it to be soft and powerful.
Yep. Yeah, and you're building your sound based on the song, because everything, I think in all music, but I think especially in worship music, your job is to serve the song, and you'll hear us say that a bazillion times on the website. But your job is to serve the song, and so you take whatever role is necessary for that particular song. Here's a great question. It goes right to, okay, so it says, any bass players watching that use no pedals like me? I really should start looking into one or two, I suppose. I have no idea where to start. And then he points out compression. So let's do this. We just said it's not necessary to have a bunch of pedals. But if you're a bass player, besides a tuner, where do you start? What's the most important thing?
Yeah, tuner's number one. Tuner's number one. Compression, I do have that. And the only reason is just to improve the tone of the bass. That's all I've got, Jay.
Yeah. I know some bass player. I know Daniel has a SansAmp on his board, which is like a little preamp that just kind of boosts the signal a little bit, warms it up, those kinds of things. Maybe certain songs, it's nice to be able to add. I know some of the lessons on our website, so the bass uses a fuzz, just like a little bit of an overdrive to kind of distort the signal a little bit. You don't want to get crazy with those, but every once in a while, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I know that there's a couple. There's a Christian Stanfill from 2 Passion albums ago that's got it. I remember
That has overdrive.
Yes, that has some overdrive in it.
Yeah. And it depends on the song. If it's a aggressive song with a pick and overdrive, it definitely can sound cool.
Yeah.
The Killers, their bass player, he picks most of their songs, and he uses some overdrive. It sounds really incredible. But then that's a whole nother topic. You're in a church, and you got a sound guy. Maybe he's a volunteer, maybe he's not, and it could get pretty messy pretty quick. So I like to err on keeping it simple.
Yeah. Here's a great question. I get this actually a lot. This is from Randy and Stacy. I've not used them, but thoughts on effects on acoustic guitar. Even acoustic guitar players are just dying to use pedals. I will tell you, the only pedal that I use for my acoustic guitar, and it is so important, well, besides the tuner. Always get a tuner first. But I actually use a Boss bass EQ. So not the guitar EQ. I actually use the bass EQ because it gives me more control over the frequencies that really matter. But being able to EQ your acoustic guitar is really valuable. And I generally keep it in the same setup. So I usually, because I play in more acoustic environments, I boost the lower range a little bit. I dip in the middle, kind of do the V kind of a deal. So and then the highs pop up. If you're playing with larger bands, you may want to dip some of your bass down so that you don't take up that frequency and stay in the higher range. So just having that, it is night and day difference. When I click that pedal on, it's like, boom, everything sounds great. And that's like a $70 or $80 pedal or something like that. And it's phenomenal. So
that's cool.
That's definitely, I think with acoustic guitar, that's kind of a winner. And it doesn't cost you a fortune.
And we're gonna start actually reviewing some of these gear, these pedals that we use and love, and we get asked all the time, like you said.
Yeah. We'll pass along our favorites. We won't hit you with everything, but
no,
we try a lot of stuff. But there's certain things like that Boss bass EQ. I'm like, that's the best kept secret. People always ask me like, how are you getting that guitar tone? There's a little ugly brown pedal.
With one button.
Yeah, Boss is not. They're not the most attractive pedals. We'll just say that.
Stu G.
Yes,
probably my favorite ever.
He's going to be joining us soon, isn't he?
What's that?
He's going to be joining us on the podcast in April.
He'll be joining us in April. Yeah, he's a good friend, good golfer. So good questions.
All right, here's another one. This is a great question because I've run into this quite a bit. When your current band is composed of people who don't know theory, how do you incorporate and play with more classically trained musicians? So there is a definite disconnect between classically trained musicians and kind of the more rock pop stuff, right? That's just kind of a different gap. Yeah, there's a big gap there. And I think you have to, for one, it's something that the worship leader needs to be the one that's working, because it's easy for people to start like pointing fingers at, you don't know how to play your instrument. Like the really classically very technically gifted players will look at the guy that just wants to play a couple straight notes and is like, this guy is bad at his instrument and he's ruining everything in the band, right? And then likewise, some guitarist that's like playing, that's more used to like the rock band setup, and then you bring in a piano player who's been playing in church for the last 30 years and they're just running all over the keyboard. You're kind of like, why am I even here? Like, you're not listening to anybody. You're just wanting us to all follow you, and there's no space for me. You're taking up the entire spectrum, right? So I think in those kind of environments, you have to have the worship leader that's willing to kind of set the vision for what the band is doing, and then coach each individual player to match that scenario.
Yeah. In a worship set, there's not a lot of space for a piano that can, all over the.
Whereas that's how it used to be done, though. Think about, Laura was this amazing piano player. Laura Martin. Was that her last name?
Laura Martin.
Yeah. She's an amazing piano player. Yeah. Yeah. We're going way back. Dan and I are.
I have another one for you.
We're in the Wayback Machine. Or Lou Imperial, right?
That was the one.
Yeah.
Or Rich Ricardo on bass.
Yes. Well, here's the thing. All those guys, like incredible piano players, they could get on a piano and just, I mean, it was like Liberace, right? Like, and they could cover and they'd be playing melody and driving the rhythm and all that kind of stuff. But they really struggled when they were put in a band situation because there was no room for anybody else. And then there was a lot of clashing. And so, some of those things you have to kind of walk those lines really carefully and be political about them. You're not trying to demean what somebody does. You want to honor the work that they've done and the talent that they have. At the same time, you kind of still have to set the vision of what is the band trying to accomplish and how do we accomplish that, and be direct about that. You can kind of skirt the issue for a long time, but at the end of the day, when you can say, here's what we need you to do and this is why, I think a good musician will rise to that challenge.
Yeah.
But if you just can't say, don't do that,
yeah.
Usually it's like, who are you?
Yeah, there's definitely a way to lead, but there's a way to serve.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a guest sitting in at a church and you're the most professional musician that shows up, doesn't matter. Your first question to the leader, worship leader, hey, what do you want out of me?
Yeah, that's a great question to ask.
What do you want out of me? So, and he may say, hey, we move around, do what you want, flow. We trust you. Or, hey, keep it simple. Play in the pocket.
Yep.
So
beautiful. That's the dream worship musician right there. All right, let's take a couple more. We're kind of diverging over into a lot of gear questions here, so I'm just going to kind of hit these really fast, and then it's probably about time to wrap up. What do you say, Dan?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's take another one.
Okay, real quick, difference between distortion and fuzz pedals. To my ear, it's almost a terminology of the same thing. Usually, like fuzz, distortion, overdrive are kind of all different levels of an overdriven signal. So like overdrives are usually kind of the feeling of that broken up amp when you're strumming away. And then on my lessons, I use an AC30. And so when I dig in, it kind of overdrives the tubes. That's where that comes from. And so overdrive is there. Then you go into distortion, and that's going to be more kind of set in that tone. Like I always think of distortion as like metal, kind of heavy, kind of the grunge, just heavier stuff thrown through the Marshall stack is going to give you more distortion, a little heavier overdrive essentially. And then fuzz is usually that, and then like over the top, and it's looser and fuzzier.
It kind of is.
That's the technical term. Yeah, but it's all basically the same effect in just different levels, different EQs. I mean, there's a million out there. And then there's one more question here. What's your opinion on modelers instead of amps and pedals?
That's you, buddy.
And I will say this, depending on what you value and what your need is will determine what you choose to do. So for example, like we made a patch for the Pod HD 500X. A lot of worship musicians use that. So I made like a worship artistry patch that you can download for free and just put it on there. And then that kind of gives you all the effects that I have on my board and does it through that modeler. I think if I was a worship musician, if that's all I was doing, so I was just kind of that weekend warrior, I'm not playing in clubs, I'm not recording. I think a modeler, just for ease of use for everybody, if you have a good one, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's $500 out of the box, and you can set it how you want, and it's not loud, and there's no loud stage volume, and you can switch, and you basically have all these things that you don't have with like actual equipment. That being said, I'm a more tactile person, and to me, nothing beats the sound of a good AC30. Strumming a Telecaster G chord through an AC30 might be the greatest sound God ever invented. And so I love that tone, and no matter how much a model does it, it's not quite the same. Same thing with pedals. I like to tweak knobs. I don't like things buried in menus and digital. It's not necessarily the sound of them, but it's just kind of, I prefer turning a knob to punching buttons. And so therefore I prefer a pedal board, and it's a lot more work to have those things, but my stuff mainly stays at the studio now. So it's awesome. I love it, but it just really depends on what your preference is.
Yeah.
And
Do you have a
what you're
road
using
case for your pedal board?
I do. Yeah. We're actually, the guy over at Creation Boards wanted to make me a board, which those are gorgeous. I don't know if you've ever seen those pedal boards, but they're
I haven't.
amazing. I'm going to try and get one in here, and then maybe that'll go in our few of our favorite things, because they're just these super pretty pedal boards that are functional and nice.
And they're, what are they, custom? Or?
Yeah, yeah, you can get them custom, or they have all different different cases. They're gorgeous. Check out Creation pedal boards. They're really amazing.
Very good. Very good. Well, I really appreciate everybody sticking around with us. It's been fun. Jay, you're always fun to talk to, my friend.
Well, I try. I work really hard to be fun to talk to. I don't get to talk to people very often. I'm always in my little studio.
You are in your cave, my man. Well, we let Jay out for the podcast, but I assure you, he's going back in right after this.
That's actually very true.
To add content. But listen, if you're live, great. If you want to check out some of our old podcasts, we just started this 6 weeks ago or so.
Yeah, this is our episode 6, I believe.
Yeah, well, please, it's a huge help to go over to iTunes and throw us a review. The way it works is that the more reviews you get, kind of the more exposure. So
yeah,
I'm going to be real honest.
Yeah, well, and there's that. And when you do review, just a note, a number of people have gone in there and reviewed Worship Artistry as a website, which is awesome. And you've said very kind things. It would be great if you'd review the podcast.
Yes.
In the iTunes store,
Unless
talk
you
about the podcast. Yes. Hey, you know what? I don't know. Somebody could throw a 1-star review in there and just kind of make it seem, a little more. It's all good stuff so far. That's great. We're making a slight adjustment to the schedule. The live podcast is going to happen at 1:30 p.m. Central, and we are going to be joined by Zach Bolin from Citizens and Saints. He's the lead singer there and one of the main writers. And I'm super stoked to hang out with him. And we're going to be talking about leading worship outside the box. And if you've ever heard of any of Citizens and Saints music, you can check them out. They wrote the song Made Alive. They've got a beautiful version of the song In Tenderness. And they're making great music, really theologically deep music. And at the same time, they just have a unique, I think, a very unique sound. And so I'm really excited to talk with him about playing outside the box. Maybe we'll talk about some of those other bands besides U2.
All right, well, until next time, God bless, guys.